In this video, we're gonna be talking about the Canon R6 Mark II and how it compares to the R6 Mark I, which has been my camera that I've been using to shoot everything for the past year and a half or so. And in the past week and a half that I've had this camera, I've done real estate photo video shoots, custom video projects, talking head scenes, lifestyle photo shoots, and more. It's been a busy week. So let's dive into it and see how the R6 Mark II compares to the original and see if it fixes some of the things that really annoy me about this camera. Let's get into it right now. Whoosh. So like many of my other camera reviews, I like to just dive into the body and the build and certain features of that first before getting into the actual photo and video that it can do. And first off, it's really similar. It's practically identical to the R6 Mark I. There's two main features, two main things that they updated that I actually really like, and it's like the only two differences on the camera. The first thing you'll notice is this right here. The on and off switch is actually on the hand that you hold the camera with. And it's traditionally right here, but they moved it over here. And at first it was kind of weird, like what's the point of that? But if you think about it, you know, if you pull out your camera, now you can turn it on with one hand versus having to reach over, put it in your other hand, turn it on like you have to do with this camera and the other cameras they have. I actually really like that feature. Turn it off, turn it on, all with one hand. And I actually found myself getting used to that. Now when I pick up the R6 Mark I, I'm like, man, I wish it had that. The second thing that they updated that I really like is this switch right here on the opposite side, which is now a dedicated photo and video switch. So that is a big deal to me because on the Canon R6 Mark II, you have to jump over on the dial to video mode. And it's really annoying because half the time I'll miss and I'm like, having to look at the camera. And if you're doing a gig, let's say you're doing an event and you're doing photo video for it on one camera, it takes away and you might miss shots or something. If you have to look down, okay, is this the right mode? No, I missed it. And even on the R5, I don't have that camera, but you have to also go, because it doesn't have the dial, you have to go into the menu, select video. So there's more steps. Now it's just, you know, one step and another one, and it saves the settings in either photo mode or video mode that you previously used. And for me, primarily, that does a lot of real estate photo video. That's great because I can just switch between the two and my settings are just ready to go. So you can see right here I'm in photo mode, flip to video mode, back to photo mode. Really like that feature. The other thing worth mentioning that might be mostly geared for like, you know, future-based things and more photography is this multi-function shoe that is just updated from the original version. I didn't have much use out of it other than I put in my Godox trigger for a lifestyle shoot, worked great. Other than that, just felt like mentioning it, but the biggest difference is simply being the on and off switch and the dedicated photo video mode. And now moving on to the biggest reason why I rented this camera, and that is for the video mode to see how the video compares and if it fixes a couple of main issues that I have and struggle with on a daily basis with the R6 Mark I. First off, and let's jump to it, get it over with, and that is the overheating. I experienced zero overheating on this camera, and I put it through a variety of shoots. I did a church shoot with it where I had it on a gimbal where I documented my friend Wes at his church for 4+ hours, no, 3.5 hours, I think, and it never overheated, all in 4K 60. Footage I got with it was so awesome. I'll share some of those clips here, but the whole time I had it on a gimbal, I didn't even swap the battery, which is one of the other main tips. The battery life on this is incredible. The LPE6NH batteries that come with these last so much better. Like I have some leftover batteries from my 5D Mark IV that are just the regular LPE6 batteries, and they work on these no problem, but they just don't last anywhere near as long as these. Like I was really impressed. Like I had it on a gimbal in 4K 60 on the whole time for like 3.5 hours, and by the end of the shoot I had 1 bar left. Same thing for real estate listings. If I use the other batteries, I would go through maybe 2 batteries, never had to switch any. So I feel like the battery life is improved, and that's just really awesome. But back to the overheating, I didn't experience any of it, and that's one of my biggest gripes with the R6 Mark I, because primarily in my business, I do real estate photo videos. Some of these listings are really nice, fancy luxury listings, and it takes me anywhere from 2.5 to 3.5 hours to shoot everything. If I'm doing it on my R6 Mark I, by the end of the shoot, or by the time I'm switching into video mode, because I'll do all the photography first and then all the video at the end, and then all the video for the second half of the shoot, the camera is already giving me like a 15-minute timer or a 10-minute timer, and it's come really close to overheating, if not actually overheating. And I know what you're gonna say, maybe you're thinking like, why don't you shoot everything in 1080 where there will be no overheating, but I just can't. You know, I love the way the 4K looks in these cameras, even better on this one from the oversampled 6K sensor, which looks really great. And I can't do that, especially because when we do vertical edits and we punch into it, it looks really great still, versus if you shot it in 1080, it would fall apart. So I refuse to shoot it in 1080. I want to shoot everything in 4K, and it just just looks really great, and this camera gave me no problems with that. In this really hot summertime that we're getting into in Texas, I had it outside the whole time for like a 3-hour luxury listing shoot and gave me no issues. And again, the little overheating meter didn't come up whatsoever. And so that's a big deal, because on mine, the second I get into 4K 60, it immediately starts the timer. So it already starts at 25 minutes, you know, after 5 minutes goes down to 20, 15, 5 minutes, whatever. And that's so annoying. I don't want that pressure to be like, oh man, I gotta hurry up. And in this one, that didn't even come on whatsoever. So I can honestly say that I feel like the overheating is fixed in this camera, and you can shoot uncropped 4K 60, 30, and 24 with no problem. And that is another perk, the uncropped, which my camera, the R6 Mark I, has like a 1.07 crop, and you're probably thinking like, that's not a big deal, but for real estate, when you're wanting to film everything at 15 millimeters, it is, because you're losing that extra millimeter or so, and you want that. And so I could tell a slight difference that the listings look a little bit better, because you can get that full field of view. So that's also a great thing. And back to the oversampled image, it looks really, really nice. And in the sense where I thought it was just like, I don't like, for example, the iPhone, you know, on my iPhone 13 Pro, the video is great, but the image just looks so overly sharp. And that's what I was afraid with this camera, thinking that's gonna be like really overly sharp 4K, but still not really be that good. It's not the case whatsoever. The oversampled 4K from the 6K sensor is really, really nice. And the great thing about that is, even though it's in 4K and you're working on a 4K timeline, you can still punch into that image by like 120, 125%, and it's gonna look really good. It's not gonna be looking like really soft 4K, for example. So in that sense, I actually prefer that rather than just being a regular 4K image. And yeah, everything I shot with this camera was really, really nice. Whenever I would bring it into Premiere, throw a Rec 709 grade over it to see everything in a regular color space, because I shot everything in C-Log 3 Cinema Gamut on this camera, it looks really, really nice. And so I can't complain about the image, other than the fact that I wish it had C-Log 2. That's the only bummer. Another feature that they added in this camera, which is something that I feel like should be a standard across all cameras, is the no record limit. So now you can film as long as your batteries can last. And I know this because I recently filmed a realtor bio shoot, and I let this camera roll for about an hour or an hour and 15 minutes, and I had no problems whatsoever. Again, no overheating, nothing in 4K 24, which is great. But that should be a standard across all of these newer mirrorless cameras. That's a big thing, and that was actually the main reason why I rented this camera, was for that bio shoot. I didn't want to go into this agent bio shoot with my original camera, because I would have to just, you know, stop my takes. And what if we were in the middle of a really good conversation, in the middle of a really good interview scene, and then all of a sudden, oh, wait, hold that thought, gotta start a new video clip. That's one of the reasons I wanted this, along with the second camera, because I wanted 2 angles, but the no record limit is finally a thing that should be a must in all cameras. They also added some additional features in the camera, like false color, which is really nice, because especially in the beginning or beginners, it is really hard. They don't make it easy to expose log profiles on these cameras really easy at all, because if you don't know what you're doing, you can easily overexpose and underexpose your image, which you're going to result with, you know, a not great looking image, because you can't bring that exposure back or save those highlights you've blown out like you maybe could with a raw photo. So adding the false color is pretty nice, but the only thing that I didn't like about it is if you have the log preview on, which I don't know anyone that shoots looking at logs. So if you have the log preview on so you can see regular colors, you're not going to be able to use false color. So you have to turn off the preview, and then you can enable false color, which is kind of dumb. I haven't found a really solid workaround for that. So you have to go to Canon log settings, turn view assist off, then you go to the 7th menu, and then you can go to zebra settings. Not zebra settings. You can go to, which is what I use all the time. I still use zebras. False color, and it gives you an index of what all the colors mean, which is great. And then you can go and turn it on, and you have a false color looking image. So that's really great to get skin tones correct, whatever you're trying to expose them at, or whatever scene you're dealing with. But again, I just wish that I could assign it to a custom button, which you can, but I can't assign view assist to a custom button. So I'd have to go into the menus, turn it off, enable it. So that's a bit of a bummer. So I still find myself using zebras. That's how I expose this scene and most of the other things when I'm shooting. They also updated the menu system with some new autofocus modes, which works great. And on the Canon R6 Mark I, there were no issues whatsoever when it came to autofocus. For photo and video, it's been great for me. But they added new features where it automatically can detect subjects if it's, you know, people, animals, vehicles, or just have it off to where it's just the main focus mode that you use, like center point or whatever. So that is actually really handy, because I kept it on center focus, but then if it picks up someone in the scene, for example, if it picks up a person, which is what I had it set at, even though you're set on center focus, it's automatically going to track that person's face or eyes, whatever you're using. And it was really accurate. So that's pretty good. But like I said, on the R6 Mark I, that was really great, but it's also great to see that it's getting even better and more advanced on the R6 Mark II. So autofocus again, just so good. Lastly, one of the things that does seem like it got updated on this camera is the IBIS. The in-body image stabilization, especially paired with a lens and RF lens that has it, like this 15-35, seems like it got better, especially for handheld stuff. And one of the things that I don't really see a lot of people talk about is the electronic image stabilization you can enable in the camera. Pair that with the in-body image stabilization and the lens stabilization, and you get a really smooth image. Obviously, if you use the electronic stabilization, it crops in a little bit, but it doesn't really matter because you're most likely just shooting handheld and that crop is okay, but it looks really good. And again, because it's oversampled, it's still gonna look like a crispy 4K image. And the test that I did, whether if it was me just shooting some foliage or some scenes, like especially where I was at a lake at sunset, testing that dynamic range, it was really nice to just be able to get smooth handheld shots, which I already could on the R6 Mark I, but it was like, sometimes it's okay. And on this one, it just seems a little bit more improved, where those tighter shots look like I was on a gimbal, in my opinion. So again, I think that got an upgrade as well. Now jumping to the photo mode, it's a 24 megapixel sensor versus the R6 is 20 megapixels. And honestly, I can't really tell a difference. You know, they're both great. I never had a complaint on the R6 Mark I being 20 megapixels coming from my 5D Mark IV, which was 30, because the sensor is so much better, sharper, more dynamic range. I'd rather have that and versus more megapixels. And this one being 24, again, already being such a great sensor, I couldn't tell a difference. The images are obviously great. While I was at that lake, I shot some cool landscape photos, and I'll show you the before and after on that. So much flexibility in those raw files, which is really nice. And the lifestyle shoot that I did with this was really, really awesome. Performed great, just like I did with my camera, but those upgraded autofocus features where it automatically detects your person, or you can just switch to center point or whatever, was really nice. And again, no complaints. The images look really good. Obviously, having 4 more megapixels is great, especially if you're gonna crop into your image. That's probably the only downside of having 20 megapixels on the Canon R6 Mark I, because if I did have to ever crop into it, it's not that great. You do lose a lot of quality. So having a little bit more megapixels in this, which I feel like 24 is like the industry standard for a professional camera, obviously that is great to have versus not having it. But as far as like being able to tell a difference, if you're primarily a photographer, don't do any video, and you're on the R6, I don't really think you'll be able to see that extra 4 megapixels. So let's jump into my final thoughts about this camera. Honestly, I think it's a great camera. It's probably the perfect, or not perfect, obviously things can be improved, but it's a pretty near perfect hybrid photo video camera. So that is one thing that I can say. Whatever, all the variety of gigs that I did this week, whether it was photography based, mostly videography based, performed great. Nothing where I was like, man, I wish it had this, or wow, it can't do this. Versus my camera, I have reached some of those limitations on the R6 Mark I, which is really annoying, because my conclusion is just, this is what the R6 Mark I should have been in the first place. And that's probably why they rolled out this version so soon after this one. It hasn't been that long. So I feel like they noticed the issues and just, you know, let's get the second version out, because it's what the first one should have been anyway. So that is a bit of a bummer, but I still really enjoy this camera, the R6 Mark I. It still performs great when it can, in the sense that like if you don't hit in those overheating limits or anything like that. But for the week that I had it, it performed great with no limitations. Now this camera's not nowhere near perfect. Obviously, if you're a photographer, if it did have more megapixels, like 30 megapixels, that would probably be ideal, like an EOS R. I feel like 30 is great all around because you can crop in. So that is one thing that I wish it had. And then along with the video features, I wish it still was more video oriented, in the sense that like this camera should have C-Log 2. I don't understand why it can't. I know that you can do 6K raw output into an Atomos Ninja 5. I didn't talk about that whatsoever because I don't have that, but the reviews that I've seen from other people, it doesn't actually look very good. I just wish that you could shoot in this camera MP4 C-Log 2. I feel like it could handle it, especially because of that really nice sensor that it has. It would just give a little bit more of a more dynamic image in editing whenever you grade it, so that wish it had that. Instead of having false color, I wish I could have waveform instead of a histogram. That would be great. I know a lot of these things are in the cinema line, like the C70 and so on, but just again, those are little features that could really make this camera shine even more. So now I'm on the fence because I don't want to give this back. I actually have to give this camera back. I actually ended up extending my rental. I rented it from Lens Rental. They're a great rental company. That's where I get all of my gear rentals from. I rented this and I had to extend it to today because I wanted to film a video on it, but also because some shoots got pushed around. And now I'm kind of bummed that I have to give it back because I honestly got really used to it and it just performed exactly how the R6 Mark I should have. But then it's also like the similarities are so similar. You know, it's not like I'm gaining a lot more video features or I'm not gaining a lot more megapixel, higher resolution photos. It's just this like, it just simply performs how this one should. So that's kind of like, is that worth upgrading for? Or should I just try and tough it out with this one to see what else comes out pretty soon? Maybe an R5 Mark II, and that could be a game changer. So I don't know, I gotta think about it. So I think, is it worth investing in it? Of course. Depending if you're coming from like a DSLR or an EOS R or something like that, you would absolutely love this camera. But if you're on the R6 Mark I, it's hard. Unless you're just, you know, you need a second camera, which something that is like a big deal. That's another big thing. I actually realized how great it was to have this on a real estate photo video shoot. This be my video geared camera, that be my photo geared camera. Having them both ready to go on a tripod, you know, this one on a tripod, this one on a gimbal is so nice versus having to, you know, tear down the gimbal, put this on a tripod, vice versa, and just being able to do, you know, higher video production shoots like that Agent Bio shoot where this was the B cam, this was the A cam. So having two cameras in general, or if one fails, is just great. But yeah, I just don't know what I'm gonna do. My choice is already made though. I have to give it back. I can't buy this camera from them because there's like no stock in it whatsoever. None of them are in stock. When I looked on Amazon or other places, they're all temporarily out of stock. So I'm just gonna go back to see how it's been with the R6 Mark I and see how it goes from there. So that's pretty much it. That is my overview review of the Canon R6 Mark II. Like you guys know, I don't like to just throw specs at you. I'd rather do the shoot and give you real world examples. I think that's so much more beneficial versus this has this spec, this, and this. It doesn't matter. It just depends on how it actually performs in the field because that's all that matters at the end of the day, especially if your clients are happy. So leave a like if you enjoyed, comment down your thoughts, subscribe if you haven't already. I would love for you guys to be part of the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Oh, and I gotta end the video right now. I'm hitting 28 minutes, so in about 1 minute, this camera's gonna shut off. See ya.